I struggle to understand the distinction between Bhagavan's grace, personal effort, and destiny. When we turn inward, we may say it is due to grace, but could it also be simply our own effort or inclination? Similarly, when something untoward happens in life, we may call it destiny, though perhaps it could have been avoided through wiser action or greater awareness. How can we avoid understanding grace or destiny in a way that weakens personal responsibility? Also, if grace is ever present, why does it not necessarily manifest as improvement in worldly circumstances, such as family, work, health, or material well-being, especially when our efforts to turn inwards is sincere and such stability may itself make it easier to turn inward? Why do we call inward movement grace, but call the absence of favorable world conditions destiny? Am I, as a follower of this path, perhaps interpreting grace and destiny through the lens of my own spiritual assumptions?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
There are a lot of things to clarify here. Firstly, we need to understand what is grace. Bhagavan has given us a very profound understanding of what grace actually is. In one verse in Guru Vachaka Kovai, Bhagavan says that grace is what is. In other words, it is the reality. It's not, and that reality, of course, is ourself, what we actually are. So grace is not something other than ourself. It is what we actually are. Our real nature is infinite being awareness. But the nature of that being awareness is to know itself and to love itself. So our own reality, which is what is manifested outwardly in the form of Bhagavan, because it is infinite, there is nothing other than it. So rather than saying it, I'll say Bhagavan. But we need to understand Bhagavan is not just the outward form that he appears to be in our view. He is our own reality, what we actually are. So in Bhagavan's view, there is nothing other than himself. So he knows us as himself and he loves us as himself. So Bhagavan's love is infinite and all-embracing. That infinite and all-embracing love that is Bhagavan. Bhagavan and his love, of course, are one and the same thing. That infinite and all-embracing love that is Bhagavan is what we experience as his grace. So what does Bhagavan want for us? Bhagavan wants for nothing but for us to be happy. But Bhagavan doesn't want to cheat us with mere worldly pleasures, because these are fleeting, unreliable, and the more we experience worldly pleasures, the more we desire them, and so on and so forth. So Bhagavan's aim is to restore us to our natural state, our original state, to what we actually are, which is infinite happiness. So in order for us to experience the infinite happiness that we actually are, we need to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. And being aware of ourselves as we actually are entails the annihilation of ego, because ego is a false awareness of ourselves, an awareness of ourselves as this body, which is not what we actually are. So grace, the aim of grace is to eradicate ego by making us aware of what we actually are. But grace will never force us against our will. So grace works from within, enkindling in our heart the love to turn within and to merge back into our being. So regarding effort, we are constantly making effort from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, and in every dream, we are constantly making effort we are constantly seeking happiness in things other than ourselves. The very nature of the mind is to go outwards, to attach itself to, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, when he describes what is the nature of ego, he describes ego as a formless demon. It is formless because it has no form of its own. Having no form of its own means it's got no separate existence of its own. And so what ego essentially is nothing but the one infinite being awareness that we actually are. But as such, it's not ego. So ego is a spurious entity that rises from that being awareness. And it in order to rise, in order to come into being as a separate entity, it needs to grasp a form. It needs to identify itself as a form. It needs to experience itself as a form. All forms are finite because every form is... A form means anything that is in any way distinct from any other thing. So it's not just talking about physical forms. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. Everything conceivable is a form of one kind or another. So what he says about this formless demon ego is grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So from this, we have to understand that the very nature of ego is to constantly grasp form. That means to attend to things other than itself. The first form it grasps is the form of the body that it takes to be I. And since it has no form of its own, it cannot endure for even a moment without constantly being aware of itself as the form of this body. So that's why he says, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Stands means it endures. Having grasped the form of this body as I, we don't stop there. We then are constantly, our attention is going outwards, constantly attending to things other than ourselves. Attending to anything other than ourselves is grasping form. That is, because ego is formless, it's got no hands or arms to grasp anything. Grasping there means grasping in our awareness. So being aware of or attending to anything is grasping it. So having grasped the form of the body as I, ego is then constantly grasping other forms by moving its attention from one thing to another thing, to another thing, to another thing. That is what he is referring to in the third sentence when he says, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That means that the attention we pay to anything other than ourselves is the food on which we as ego, it's the food that nourishes and sustains us as ego. And since we cannot stand for a moment as ego without grasping form, if we let go of one form, we grasp another form. When he says grasping, leaving form, it grasps form, we can understand that either on a moment-to-moment basis, our attention is constantly moving from one object to another object to another object. That's one sense in which we can understand that. Another sense is when this body which we now take to be I, this is a fleeting appearance. It was born supposedly at some time a few years ago, and in a few years' time, it's going to pass away. So the ego isn't dependent on any one body, because the body it is now experiencing as I is its own projection. So if ego leaves one form, if it leaves, when this body dies, ego will leave this form, but it then projects and grasps another form. So that is also what is implied by leaving form, it grasps form. So from this we have to understand the very nature of ego is to grasp form, and all the forms it grasps are things other than itself. Because ego cannot, because we as ego cannot survive for a moment without constantly grasping form, we have what are called Viṣaya-vāsanās. Viṣayas means objects or phenomena. So it's equivalent to the word form. I mean, it refers to the same thing as form. Vāsana means inclination. That is because our very existence as ego depends on grasping form. We have very strong inclinations to grasp form. So the nature of ego is to be constantly going outwards under the sway of its Viṣaya-vāsanās. And in this context, when we say inwards and outwards, outwards means towards anything other than ourselves. So even attending to our own thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on, that is still going outwards. Going inwards means attending only to our own being. But since our being our being means what we essentially are. Since our being has no form, if we try to grasp our form, there's nothing to support ego, so it subsides back into its being. That's why in that same verse, 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, after saying leaving form, it grasps form, Bhagavan then says, if the literal meaning is, if seeking, it takes flight. That if the word that means if seeking, what that implies in that context, if it seeks to know its own reality, if it seeks to know what it actually is, it takes flight, means it'll run away. In other words, it'll subside and dissolve back into its source. So the nature of ego, as Bhagavan makes clear in that verse, is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself. But if it turns its attention back towards itself, to the extent to which it attends to itself, its own being, it thereby subsides back into its being. So, since the very nature of ego is to grasp form, the inclination or the liking or the love to attend to its own being is contrary to the very nature of ego. So the love to attend to ourself cannot come from ourself as ego. It comes from ourself as we actually are. It comes from deep within us. And what we actually are is grace. So the inclination, the liking, the love to attend to our being, which is what is sometimes called Sat-vāsanā, the inclination towards just being, that comes not from ego, because it's contrary to the nature of ego. It comes from the reality of ego, what ego actually is, which is that pure being awareness that we actually are. So the liking to attend to ourselves can come only from grace. So whatever effort we make to attend to ourselves, why do we attend to ourselves? If we had no liking to attend to ourselves, we wouldn't do so. We are attending to ourselves because we, having studied Bhagavan's teachings, we are convinced that happiness lies within us. At least we're not convinced strongly enough, but at least to some extent, at least on the surface level of our mind, we have understood and we are convinced that true happiness lies only within us. So we seek to attend to ourselves. We have a liking to attend to ourselves. That liking comes only from grace. Even the clarity to understand Bhagavan's teachings comes only from grace. So that whatever clarity we have comes from grace, and whatever love we have to attend to ourselves comes from grace. So whatever effort we make to attend to ourselves is effort we are doing under the sway of grace. So without grace, we wouldn't make any effort in this path. So it's not a matter of, is it by grace or is it by effort? It is by grace working through us in the form of effort. Bhagavan sometimes used to say, grace is not something up there in heaven, but is one day going to descend upon us. Grace is our own being, ever shining in our heart as I. It's always that the nature of grace is to pull, from within it pulls us within, and from outside it pushes us within. So grace, that everything we experience outside, all our destiny, it has been molded by grace in order to make it to be most, that is our destiny, the destiny we are experiencing in each life, is what is most conducive to our spiritual development, to eventually leading us to the point where we try to turn within. So this is all the work of grace, ultimately. As Bhagavan said, or often said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. What does he imply by that? It is grace that draws us to this spiritual path, that makes us inclined to follow this spiritual path. So the initiation, if you want to call it that, the beginning, our very beginning on this spiritual path is by grace. That's incidentally why Bhagavan never attached any importance to any form of ritual initiation. In a lot of spiritual traditions, they have some ritual form of initiation. Bhagavan used to say the very fact that you are drawn to this path means you're already initiated. But initiation simply means starting. We've already started on this path, or we wouldn't be here. The very fact we're taking interest in this subject, we're all sitting here today talking about it, means the initiation, we've already started. So it's grace that starts us on this path. It is grace that guides us and motivates us to follow this path. And eventually it is grace that will swallow us, because grace is nothing but the infinite being awareness that we actually are. And when we turn within deeply enough, that will swallow us. So literally, as Bhagavan said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So none of these things would happen but by grace. So the first question is, when we turn inward, we may say it is due to grace, but could it also simply be our own effort or inclination? Whatever effort or whatever inclination we have and whatever effort we make is itself the manifestation of grace. So it's nothing but grace. Then he goes on to say, similarly, when something untoward happens in life, we may call it destiny, though perhaps it could have been avoided through wiser action or greater awareness. I'll come back to this point later because this is a slightly different matter. How can we avoid understanding grace or destiny in a way that weakens personal responsibility? That is, grace will do everything that is necessary. Grace is doing everything that is necessary for us. But we need to be willing to yield ourselves to grace, to submit to grace. That is, grace is that power that is pulling our attention inwards. But unless we have the willingness to yield ourselves to that power, we'll be constantly resisting it. In fact, this is the nature of ego. Ego is constantly resisting that inward pull of grace. So we have the responsibility to yield ourselves to that inward pull. Yielding ourselves to that inward pull is what we experience as effort. Why is it experienced as effort? Because, as I say, the very nature of ego is to be constantly going outwards under the sway of its vasanas. So in order to hold on to self-attentiveness, we need to refrain from being swayed by the Viṣaya-vāsanās. We need to allow ourselves to be swayed only by the Sat-vāsanā. As I say, for those who are not so familiar with these terms, Viṣaya-vāsanās means the inclination to attend to things other than ourselves. Sat-vāsanā means the inclination to attend to our own being, and thereby to be as we actually are. So the grace has given us this inclination to attend to our own being. But at present, that inclination is weak, because the nature of inclinations or vasanas is whatever strength any vasana has is strength that it derives from us. Vasanas don't have strength of their own. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. The more we refrain from being swayed, refrain from allowing ourselves to be swayed by any vasana, the weaker that vasana becomes. An analogy I often give for this is smoking. If someone is a habitual smoker, they have a strong inclination to smoke because for so long they've been yielding to that inclination to smoke. So if a smoker wants to give up smoking, they have to eradicate that inclination to smoke. And the only way to eradicate that inclination is to avoid smoking. So the more they refrain from succumbing to that inclination, allowing themselves to be swayed by that inclination, the weaker that inclination becomes. Some people, they want to give up smoking, but they are not persistent enough in their efforts. They give in to the inclination to smoke. Time and time again, though they set themselves a goal of refraining from smoking, they succumb to that inclination again and again. Thereby, they make it more and more difficult for them. If someone has a firm determination to refrain from being swayed by that inclination, that is why they want to refrain from that inclination, because they understand that smoking is bad for the health. Smoking can lead to cancer and so many other conditions that are life-threatening. So because they have a liking to live long in the body and to live to be healthy, they have inclination going in two opposite directions. One is the inclination to smoke, the other is the inclination to be healthy, and thereby and therefore to refrain from smoking. So this battle goes on in the will. But we can, just like a smoker can overcome the inclination to smoke by refraining from being swayed by it, we can overcome the Viṣaya-vāsanās, the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves, by refraining from attending to other things. And how we refrain from attending to other things is by attending to ourselves. So the more we attend to ourselves, the more we strengthen the Sat-vāsanā and weaken the Viṣaya-vāsanās. So we have a part to play in this. We do have a personal responsibility, a responsibility to ourselves to try to follow this path. But that doesn't mean that grace is not playing its part. Grace is doing everything. It's grace that gives us the love and determination and perseverance to continue in following this path. So just because everything is done by grace doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility. We have the responsibility to yield ourselves to the inward pull of grace. And then the Bharat goes on to write, also, if grace is ever present, why does it not necessarily manifest as improvement in worldly circumstances, such as family, work, health, or material well-being, especially when our effort to turn inwards is sincere, and such stability may itself make it easier to turn inwards? As I said earlier, grace, which is Bhagavan and his grace are one and the same. Bhagavan doesn't want to cheat us by giving us, merely giving us a comfortable bodily existence. That even if the most comfortable bodily existence, even if we are born into a wealthy family, we have everything we want, and we end up with a nice husband or wife and nice children, and all people are kind to us. If we lived a very, very favorable life, still sooner or later his body is going to go away. And there's always we're always vulnerable to disease, to accidents, to everything. So there's no such thing as a perfect life. And sometimes the very materially very favorable circumstances are not actually favorable for worldly effort. I mean, for making us inclined to turn within. In the lives of many great saints, we see they undergo so many difficulties in so many ways. And in the Mahabharata, after the great war is over, Krishna asked Kunti to pray for any boon. Kunti was the mother of the Pandavas, the 5 princes, who had just won this battle after so many years of undergoing so many hardships. And when Krishna asked her to pray for any boon, what she said is, always give us difficulties. And Krishna said, why? All your difficulties are now over after so many years. Why do you ask for difficulties? And she said, so long as we are facing difficulties, our mind is depending on you. If everything is favorable, our mind won't be depending on you, it will be depending on the favorable circumstances. This is not exact words, but it's something to that effect, she said. So this illustrates the fact that it's often the adversity that we face that actually is beneficial for us from a spiritual point of view. Because when we face difficulties, difficulties in the family, difficulties in work, health problems, material problems, financial problems, all these things, people may think, oh, all these are distracting my mind away from making spiritual effort. But actually, if we take it correctly, if we respond correctly, these things should motivate us to turn within more and more. So whatever destiny we are given, what is destiny, or prārabdha, the word used in the technical term used in Vedanta philosophy. That is, prārabdha is the fruit of our past karmas that have been selected for us to experience in this lifetime. That is, the karmas that bear fruit are what are called āgāmya. Those are the actions of mind, speech, and body that we do under the sway of our Viṣaya-vāsanās. In other words, under the sway of our will. those actions bear fruit. The fruit of those actions gets stored in what is called Sañcita, which is simply a word that means a heap or a pile. So that's the store of all the fruits of all our past actions that we haven't yet experienced. And from that vast store, within each lifetime, we're accumulating more fruit than we're experiencing. So that's an ever-growing pile. Particularly if we're very worldly, we have lots of worldly desires, we'll be creating fruit at a faster and faster rate and building up that pile more and more. So there's a huge pile of fruits of past actions, from past births, going back thousands or millions of lives. We've done so many good actions and bad actions. Those the fruit of those, from that pile of fruit, God or grace selects those fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So whatever we are given to experience in this life is our destiny, our prārabdha. That prārabdha is tailor-made to suit our needs at our present stage of spiritual development. So whatever we experience, sometimes we may seem to experience favorable circumstances, sometimes unfavorable circumstances, but whatever it is, whatever we are given to experience, it's all what is most conducive to turning our attention inwards. And Bhagavan made it very clear, that is, he, in 1898, just over 2 years after Bhagavan had left home, his family came to know where he was, and as soon as his older brother could afford it, he because they were after his father passed away when he was age 12, they were financially in very bad condition. They were looked after by his uncle and others. But anyway, so his older brother had got a job, and he saved up money in order to bring his mother because she wanted to see Bhagavan. And when she came, she was praying to him to come back home. And she was saying, if you want to do all your meditation or whatever it is you're doing, you can do all that at home. But at least you should allow me, your mother, to take care of you and to provide for all your needs and everything. Bhagavan just sat there without saying anything. So the people, other people who were there, it pained their heart to see Bhagavan's mother weeping and pleading with him, and Bhagavan sitting there as if indifferent. So finally someone gave him a paper and pencil, because in those days Bhagavan very seldom spoke. So people had an idea that he was keeping a vow of silence. He wasn't actually keeping a vow of silence. He just had no inclination to say anything, so he didn't say anything. So they gave him a paper and pencil and asked him to write a reply to his mother. So what he wrote there, the meaning of what he wrote there is, in accordance with the destiny of each person, he who is for that, that's when the term Bhagavan uses, he who is for that, what he's referring to is God, who is the one who allots the fruit of our past actions. So he who is for that, being there means being in each place or in the heart of each one of us. The literal meaning of ātma-vicāra is will cause to dance. In other words, we will be made, God will make us do whatever actions are necessary in order for our destiny to unfold. For example, if it's our destiny to be a doctor, in order to be a doctor, we have to study, we have to pass exams and everything. So we'll be made to do all those things. So that's what Bhagavan says. In accordance with the destiny of each person, he who is for that, being in there. Being in each place will make them act. Then in the next sentence he says, what will never happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. What will happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. This is certain. Therefore, being silent is good. What does he imply by saying that? When he says whatever is to happen, what is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort, what he means by that is what is destined, what is destined not to happen will not happen. However, when he says en murchikaram, that means in spite of whatever the effort, when he says that, he clearly implies, though what is destined to happen is going to happen, we are free to want to experience things that are not destined. And likewise in the next sentence, when he says what is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. We have the freedom to want to avoid what is destined. We have the freedom to try to avoid it, but we have no freedom actually to avoid it. So whatever we may think, oh, if I'd acted more wisely, I could have avoided that whatever happened. No, it's all predetermined. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. So this is a thing that a lot of people have difficulty understanding, but it's actually very simple. It's in many of the books that record Bhagavan's answers to questions, because the people who recorded didn't always understand very clearly. There's some confusion. What Bhagavan actually taught is whatever we are to experience, or whatever we are given to experience in this life is all predetermined, cannot be changed at all. We cannot experience anything that is not destined for us to experience. We cannot avoid experiencing what is destined. So all that we are to experience is determined by destiny. But that doesn't mean that we don't have freedom. We have freedom of will and we have freedom of action. So it may be, for example, our destiny to live our whole life in poverty. But just because we're destined to live in poverty, that doesn't stop us wanting to be rich. It doesn't stop us trying to be rich. But however much we want to be rich, however much we try to be rich, we cannot be rich because our destiny is to live in poverty. So our freedom of will and action determines what we want to experience and what we try to experience. Destiny determines what we are to experience. So both are perfectly, there's no contradiction between they're two distinct domains. What we are to experience is determined by destiny. What we want to experience, what we try to experience, that is determined by our freedom of will and action. So there's nothing that has happened in our life or could happen in our life but we could avoid. It's all predetermined. However much we want to avoid it, how much we try to avoid it, we cannot avoid it. And if it's not destined to happen, however much we try for it, however much we want it, however much we try for it, it will not happen. And then Bhagavan says, iduve tinnam, this is certain. And his conclusion is, therefore, being silent is good. What does he mean by being silent? Does he mean we should just sit like a rock and not do anything, not even make effort to put food in our mouth? No, because as he said in the first sentence, in accordance with our destiny, we will be made to act. It's not the destiny that makes us act. It is God who makes us act in accordance with our destiny. So whatever we need to do, whatever we ought to do, we'll be made to do. But that doesn't mean that all the actions we do are actions we're made to do, because we have three instruments of action: mind, speech, and body. These are being driven by two forces. One is by God to make them act in accordance with destiny, and the other is they're being made, we're acting under the sway of our vasanas, in other words, under the sway of our own will. So both are going on in our life. Sometimes our will is in conflict with what is destined to happen, in which case what is destined to happen will overrule our will. Sometimes many things that happen in our life, it turned out just as I wanted, we say. That is, we made effort for it, we wanted it, we made effort for it, and it happened. We think it happened because we wanted it and because we made effort for it. Actually, it happened because of destiny. It just so happened our desires happened to be in accordance with what the destiny happened to be. Sometimes it's like that, sometimes it's the other way. So, but we cannot change our destiny at all. So we shouldn't think that we can avoid anything through wiser action or greater awareness. That doesn't happen. And the same about the circumstances that are given to us. Grace is not going to change us. It's grace that has given us our present circumstances, and those are the circumstances that are most conducive to our spiritual development at our present stage of spiritual development. This is why, for example, some people, their destiny is to maybe be a gangster or something. Does the fact that they're destined to be a gangster mean therefore it's not their responsibility because that they do all these bad things? It's their destiny? No. But the destiny to be a gangster is allotted to them because the destiny is always tailor-made to suit us at our present stage of spiritual development. So a good person will not have a destiny to be a gangster. Or if they have a destiny to be a gangster, very quickly they may be born in the wrong circumstance. They may be born in a gangster family, but they'll turn out to be good in the end because it's according to the inclination. So whatever destiny we have is the destiny that is most suited to us according to our present inclinations, our present stage of spiritual development, and what will be most conducive to our further development. So another thing Bhagavan used to say, whether you call it destiny or God's will, it's all the same. Because whatever destiny we have, it's God's will. It's God who's allotted this destiny to us. So whatever our circumstances may be, we all face adverse circumstances in so many ways. We need to accept all these as given to us by Bhagavan for our own good. If we have such an attitude of acceptance, that will be very conducive to our that's the attitude that is conducive to surrender. If we face difficulties, if maybe some person is giving us a lot of difficulty, rather than seeing it, oh, this person is a bad person, they're giving me difficulty, through this person, Bhagavan is giving me these difficulties for my own good. So we don't our attitude towards these things changes. The more we recognize that whatever happens, nobody can do any harm to us that is not permitted by Bhagavan. So if we face adverse circumstances, if everything seems to be going against us, it's going against us because such is the will of Bhagavan, and it's his will for our own benefit. And finally, coming to the last set of questions, why do we call the inward movement grace but called the absence of favorable work and favorable worldly conditions destiny. Well, that is just, I mean, destiny is grace. Whatever destiny we're given, whether it's seemingly favorable or seemingly unfavorable, it is all grace. And if it's seemingly unfavorable, it's only seemingly unfavorable. It is actually favorable. It is what is most beneficial for us. Am I, as a follower of this path, perhaps interpreting grace and destiny through the lens of my own spiritual assumptions? Yes, I think that seems to be the case. Bharat has certain assumptions. So we need to understand what is most fundamental is grace. It is grace that manifests outwardly in the form of our destiny, and that destiny is pushing us, that is outside in the form of our destiny, grace is pushing us within, and from within, grace is pulling us within. So our effort is our yielding ourselves to the inward pull of grace, rather than yielding ourselves to the outward pull of our Viṣaya-vāsanās. So I think it looks like Bharat is not here, but does anyone else have any questions about anything I've said? Was it a clear answer, or was anything unclear?
Michael?
Yes.
It was really profound and very, very beautifully said. From a practical standpoint, from day-to-day life,
Yes.
can you give us some examples of people that we admire, like Sadhu Om and Muruganar, how that Sadhu Om you know very well,
Yeah.
how they capitalized on this teaching? Like, how did they radically accept Bhagavan's teaching? What in their life did they do that looks to me like Bhagavan wants us to accept things as they are? And you called it Sharanagati or surrender.
Yeah.
So how did they do that? And because therefore they reached a very high state, like Bhagavan's state.
Yes.
So that's what we want to do. So if we can learn from their examples,
Yes.
then that will be very helpful.
Well, firstly, they both faced a lot of adversity in many forms. For example, Muruganar was, Sadhu Om came to Bhagavan, was with Bhagavan only for the last 4 years. Muruganar was with Bhagavan he first came to Bhagavan in 1923, and he settled permanently in Tiruvannamalai a year or two later, after his mother passed away. The reason he didn't settle down immediately was because he had an elderly mother he was looking after. When she passed away, then Muruganar came and settled. So Muruganar was with Bhagavan continuously for about 25 years. Muruganar was very close to Bhagavan because he was so closely attuned with Bhagavan's teachings. He was also a great Tamil poet. And it was through Muruganar that many of the important works of Bhagavan came into being. Works like ātma-vicāra, the song on self-knowledge, where it was Muruganar, it was because Muruganar that Bhagavan wrote that. The refrain and the post-refrain were written by Muruganar, given to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan wrote the verses. And then Upadēśa Undiyār, or Upadēśa Saram as it's called in Sanskrit. It was Muruganar who created the circumstances for Bhagavan to write that. Uļḷadu Nāṛpadu, the 40 verses, that was entirely at Muruganar's request. And of course, Muruganar also recorded Guru Vācakavai, as well as composing thousands and thousands of other verses and songs on Bhagavan. And people used to refer to him as Bhagavan's shadow. He was so close to Bhagavan. But of course, that creates jealousy. So there were people who were jealous of Muruganar because they saw how close he was to Bhagavan. So people, some people who are jealous of him poisoned Chinnaswami's mind against him. Chinnaswami is Bhagavan's younger brother, Niranjananda Swami. He actually, when he took sannyasa, he took the name Niranjananda Swami, but he was generally called Chinnaswami. Chinna means small, the small Swami, because he's Bhagavan's younger brother. He was, from about 1930 onwards, he was the manager of the ashram, and he called himself Sarvadhikari, which means the one with all control of everything. So he was the person in charge of the ashram. People who were jealous of Muruganar poisoned his mind against Muruganar by saying, see, Swami, Muruganar is trying to be very, very close to Bhagavan. So if anything happens to Bhagavan, if Bhagavan passes away, Muruganar is going to try to claim that he's Bhagavan's successor. And then you'll be under Muruganar. So in this way, they poisoned his mind. So Chinnaswami was always, he didn't understand Muruganar. Muruganar is least interested in, Muruganar would never dream of becoming Bhagavan's successor or anything, because in Bhagavan's path, there's no need for a successor, because Bhagavan is the eternal Guru. Bhagavan made it clear, Guru is not just the body. That is, Guru appears in human form, but what Guru actually is the eternal reality in the heart of all of us. And so Muruganar would never even have dreamt of wanting to be Bhagavan's successor or anything like that. But Chinnaswami, because he didn't know anything about all these spiritual things or anything, his main aim was to build a temple for his mother, because he was very devoted to his mother. And he also was terrified of Bhagavan. He was terrified of Bhagavan, but at the same time, he was very devoted to Bhagavan. He wanted to build up Ramanashram and make it a place where people could come and everything. So he had good motives, but he was misled by people who were jealous. So he always was opposed to Muruganar. And in this way, so many difficulties Muruganar faced. All these things were known to Bhagavan. Bhagavan very seldom interfered. Sometimes, rarely, he would interfere, but generally, Bhagavan allowed things to happen as they were to happen. And Muruganar knew this. Muruganar knew. Muruganar didn't ask Bhagavan, well, please stand up for me. Of course, no. He accepted, this is the way it is. This is the nature of the world. There'll always be people who are jealous and all these things. It's just, who has a life free of difficulty? Even when Bhagavan was living on the hill, there were other sadhus on the hill who were jealous of him. Some of them even tried to kill Bhagavan. They tried to roll rocks down. Because why they were jealous is because people were attracted to Bhagavan. So visitors who were coming, they were all coming to visit Bhagavan, because there were many sadhus living in the caves on the hill. So the other sadhus, not all the other sadhus, some of the other sadhus were very good and had much love and admiration for Bhagavan. But some of them, who wanted their own following, they were jealous that all the people were going to Bhagavan. So there was one who even tried to roll stones down the hill to kill Bhagavan or to drive him away. One day when Bhagavan was sitting outside Virupaksha cave, he was aware this sadhu was trying to roll stones down from up above. So he very quietly got up, he came round, and that sadhu had a big crowbar, a big iron bar, and he was trying to lever a rock to move it. And Bhagavan came behind him and was pulling on the rock, pulling on the other end of the iron bar to help him. So anyway, this is just the nature of the world. There'll always be people who are jealous. There'll always be adverse circumstances. But Muruganar was indifferent to all these things, because for Muruganar, the only thing that mattered is Bhagavan. So whatever was happening around him, he was unmindful of it. So like this, I mean, both Muruganar and Sadhu Om also faced a lot of people of the older devotees were jealous of Sadhu Om because he was relatively young, having come in the later years of Bhagavan's life, and but because he was he was such a great poet, he composed such beautiful songs on Bhagavan, and he could explain Bhagavan's teaching so clearly, and he was so close to Muruganar. There were people who were jealous of him, so he had to face his own share of difficulties, not so much in Bhagavan's lifetime, but afterwards. So all these, I mean, everyone, there's nobody who lives a trouble-free life. Even if you're born as a king or queen or and have all favorable circumstances, you have difficulties. People have marriage difficulties. People have difficulties, problems with their children, problems with their all sorts of. I mean, who has ever lived a life free of troubles? So we all face troubles. What is important is our attitude to these things, how we take it. So what Muruganar and Sadhu Om exemplified in their life was accepting all these adversities as Bhagavan's grace. Sadhu Om often used to say, because when I first came to Tiruvannamalai, to Ramanashram, many people were given to believe by certain people in the ashram who were jealous of Sadhu Om, but Sadhu Om was an enemy of the ashram. He wasn't at all an enemy of the ashram, but the people wanted people to, I mean, there were some people who wanted people to believe that in order to stop them going to visit Sadhu Om. And Sadhu Om said to me, this is all Bhagavan's grace. Because if lots of people come here, we can't do all this work. Right? I mean, he was editing Muruganar's work and everything and all these things. There were a constant stream of visitors. But if more people had come, he wouldn't have been able to do the work, so much work for Muruganar's, editing Muruganar's things. And also, another thing Sadhu Om said, is Bhagavan will never, that is, Bhagavan has one aim and one aim alone, is to crush the ego of his devotees. So he will always, like the adverse circumstances Muruganar faced, Bhagavan is setting an example to us how we should live such a complete self-effacing life. And Sadhu Om was the same. They both lived very, very unassuming, self-effacing lives. And that is an example to us. That is, if we want to say what is the essence of Bhagavan's teachings, yeah, we all know self-inquiry and self-surrender. Everyone knows that. But what is the essence of self-inquiry, self-surrender? It is subsidence. The more we turn our attention within, the more we as ego subside. And that subsidence is surrender. So the essence of Bhagavan's teachings is to subside more and more and more. In the last paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, there's a very, very beautiful sentence. Evalo kevalo tāndu narikaromo, avalo kavalo nammayundu. I'll actually say the paragraph from the beginning. In the first sentence, he says, if one's self rises, everything rises. If one's self subsides, everything subsides. One's self there refers to ego. So if we rise as ego, everything comes into being. If we as ego subside, everything will subside. Then in the next sentence, he says, this sentence I'm referring to, it's a bit difficult to translate it. It's very beautifully worded. The way it's worded in Tamil is so beautiful, but it's a bit difficult to translate it exactly in English. Evalo kevalo means to what extent, to what extent. Tandu means sinking, subsiding. It implies humility. nadikaromo means however we, literally however we walk, but it means however we conduct ourselves, however we live our life. So to whatever extent we live our life in a humble, subsiding way, avalo kavlo nan mayundu, to that extent, there is goodness. So Bhagavan's definition, if you want to know what is Bhagavan's definition of good and bad, subsiding is good, rising is bad. So the more we rise as ego, the more bad it is. The more we subside, the more we sink back within, that is what is good. So the whole aim of Bhagavan's teaching is that is humility is the very essence of Bhagavan's teachings. But humility doesn't mean just putting on a show of being humble. Oh, I'm such a humble person. So long as we think we're humble, we're not humble. So humility is the state in which there is no I at all, even to think I am humble. So that is what Muruganar and Sadhu Om exemplified in their life. As indeed Bhagavan exemplified in his life. Bhagavan was the humblest of humble. Though he's the supreme lord of the whole universe, he just wore a simple kopin. And he was just so simple.
Michael, what
Yes.
about Narasimha Swamiji and Balaram Reddy Garu? How were they perceived by you?
I mean, they were good devotees, but I wouldn't. I mean, there were many good devotees, but I wouldn't. Murugan and Sadhu Om are on a in my view anyway, from my experience, it seems to me they were something altogether exemplary.
Michael?
Yes.
Shall we move on to the next question?
Can I ask one more explanation?
Okay.
Please? Okay, Michael, this whole thing goes around the rising of the I. Is that ultimately the cosmology, Indian cosmology, that the I thought arising from the ocean of Brahman, the Absolute, creates everything?
There are so many different types of cosmology within Hinduism, because there's so many different philosophies, so many different beliefs, so many different sampradayas. These are all to suit people at different stages of spiritual development. But from our perspective, the ultimate teaching is Advaita, and the purest form of Advaita is Bhagavan's teaching. And Bhagavan's teaching is, but if I rises, everything rises. If I subsides, everything subsides. So all problems are caused by our rising as I. All goodness lies in the subsidence of our. The I that rises is ego. But underlying this rising I is the being I, which is what we actually are. So when we subside back into our being, we remain as we actually are, which is the one infinite Brahman. So that is cosmology according to Bhagavan.
It's very beautiful. Thank you, Michael.
Yep. He expresses it very beautifully in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. If ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego is not, everything is not. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. Because to the extent to which we investigate ourselves, that's to the extent to which we turn our attention inwards, we as ego subside and everything else subsides with us. Okay. So should we go
Okay,
on?
next question
Yes.
is from Yale. I'm a new member in the Ramana Satsang. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to join a Zoom yet. I did have a question. I was hoping you could pass along to Michael James if you feel it is relevant to the group. I am a mother to a child with profound disabilities, and I'm hoping for guidance on practicing ātma-vicāra while serving in a caregiver role. To make this a broader question, I'm looking for guidance on practicing ātma-vicāra while in an extreme stress situation, which I imagine happens to a lot of people.
Right. Well, firstly, I'm very sorry to hear about your child having profound disabilities. But having such a child is your destiny, and for your child, having profound disability is his or her destiny. So, though these all seem to be very adverse circumstances, they're all given by Bhagavan's grace for, well, whatever circumstances any of us face, they're all for our own good. So though it may not be obvious to you, it is for your good, but Bhagavan has blessed you with such a child. And it is for your child good, but they have been blessed with such disabilities. It may not seem to be a blessing, but ultimately everything is a blessing. Whatever we experience is a blessing. Yes, obviously, having such a care giver role is extremely stressful. I mean, that is natural, and as you rightly say, we all face difficulties. Some people may seem to face more extreme difficulties. Some people not so much, but we all face difficulties in one form or other. So how to practice ātma-vicāra in the face of all the difficulties that we face? If we are willing to accept all the seemingly adverse circumstances that we are facing, if we are willing to accept all of these as Bhagavan's blessing, whatever happens is happening according to the sweet will of Bhagavan for our own good. As Bhagavan sings in verse 2 of Āruṇācala Padigam, Ninishtam enishtam, your wish is my wish. Imbadaku, that is happiness for me. So whatever you want, I don't want anything except what you want. That is, Bhagavan is saying this, addressing it to Āruṇācala. Your wish is my wish. That is happiness for me. So he doesn't want anything that is not according to the will of Āruṇācala. And whatever be the will of Āruṇācala, that's happiness for him. So having a child with profound difficulties obviously is a very, very difficult, and it'll create stress and difficulties in so many ways. But it's all a blessing. Whatever difficulties we face, it's all a blessing. We see people who are caught up in war situations, people in Gaza, in Sudan, in so many different places, parts of the world, in Iran, in Ukraine, so many places in the world, wars are going on. People often are living under extremely difficult circumstances. But the truth is, though it may be difficult for us to accept this, the truth is whatever happens to us is all happening for our own ultimate good. So if we have that attitude and are willing to accept whatever the circumstances we may find ourselves in, we're willing to accept them all as Bhagavan's sweet will, and understand that Bhagavan's ultimate aim is for us to subside more and more and more. And most effective means by which we can subside is by turning our attention within. In other words, by practicing ātma-vicāra. So in the midst of all the difficulties, whatever difficulties we may face, who is facing them? I am facing them. Who is this I who is experiencing all these things? To whom do all these difficulties occur? That is not, we're not just to ask these questions, we are to turn our attention back towards ourselves to see what we actually are. And it's challenging. Even if we have favorable circumstances, turning within is challenging, because the real obstacles to turning within are not the external circumstances, it's our inclinations to go outwards. So whatever the circumstances may be, we can turn within if we have the love to do so. And if we don't have the love to do so, we can pray to Bhagavan for the love to do so, because this is the only way to experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. So whatever difficulties we face, let us face it with difficulty. I'm sure as a mother you have great love for your child. Consider your child to be a blessing given to you by Bhagavan. Consider all your child's disabilities to be blessings given by Bhagavan. If you and all the consequent difficulties, because of course if you're looking after your child with profound difficulties, there'll be other difficulties. There may be financial difficulties, there may be difficulties finding appropriate medical treatment or suitable care, or there may be so many difficulties I'm sure you're facing in so many ways. Or if you are willing to accept all these given to you and given to your child, they're all Bhagavan's blessings, and they're all to help you to turn within more and more and more. That it seems to me that attitude of surrender, that attitude of willingness to accept whatever our circumstances may be, that is the greatest aid to turning within. I don't know if Yael is here today, whether she was able to join or not.
I don't see her anywhere.
No, okay. Well, I hope this was a helpful answer for her.
Okay, the next question comes from Nick Gulo.
Can I just say one thing, actually? This is not actually a question. It seems he has quoted this from, when I read it, I thought this looks like it's a quotation. I Googled it and I found out where it comes from. But anyway, you can read it. It's a devotee of Bhagavan wrote like this.
Swami Ramanagiri, that
Yes.
name's familiar,
Yes,
but I'm not
yes,
sure
yes.
exactly what context it is. But
He was, I think he was from Norway or Sweden or something. And he came to India in the late 1940s, and he came to Bhagavan, and he passed away at a relatively young age. I think in the 1950s sometime, or maybe early 1960s, he passed away.
okay, this is what he says.
Yeah.
In our own mind is the greatest cheater in the world. It will make thousands of different reasons to go its way. There are three ways of handling this cheat. There's nothing but a bundle of thoughts creeping into the conscious mind. First, treat him as a friend and give him full satisfaction. This is a very long and tiresome way because he is never satisfied. Second, to treat him as an enemy and with all force try to get rid of him. This is only possible because of the grace of the divine, because the mind has got two very powerful weapons, the discriminating intellect and the imaginative faculty. These two fellows can convince even God himself that black is white. Third is the way taught by Sri Ramana in the days of silence at the foot of sacred Aruṇācala. This way, which has been adopted by this fool, is to treat the mind as a patient rather than several patients who are coming to a doctor to complain about their various ailments. Just as the doctor sits in his room receiving different kinds of patients, this fool imagines himself sitting in the sacred cave of the heart and receiving the different thought patients. You know that a sick person likes to babble for hours about his complaints. In the same way, a thought likes to multiply itself, but the doctor always cuts it short, saying, "Very good, take this medicine. Thank you very much." And then he calls another patient. This is how this fool decided to meditate. And there's a link there that
Yeah. Yeah, that is the link I found. It's from, it was an article, I think it was an article that David Goldman wrote an article about this Swami in the Mountain Path many years ago, and on the Aruṇācala Ashram website. The Aruṇācala Ashram is the ashram dedicated to Bhagavan in New York. They reproduce this on their website. So this is an excerpt from that, a biography about this Swami Ramanagiri. Since not much was known previously about Swami Ramanagiri, at the time David wrote the article, the information he had was not all very accurate. Some of it was incomplete and some of it was actually not correct. More recently, some person in Sweden has done research and actually, I think, written a book about Swami Ramanagiri, so more information has come out about him. He was certainly a very good devotee of Bhagavan, but I think from this passage that well, particularly what he says about the way taught by Bhagavan, I don't think it's a very good understanding. But I'll just comment about a few things there. He says this cheat, the mind, is nothing but a bundle of thoughts creeping into the conscious mind. People often talk about the mind being a bundle of thoughts. This is based on what Bhagavan wrote in verse 18 of Upadēśa Undiyār. Bhagavan doesn't actually use the word bundle. What he says in verse 18 is, thoughts alone are the mind. Of all thoughts, the first thought is the thought called, the root thought, sorry, the root thought is the thought called I. Therefore, the mind is this thought I. So the main point of that verse is not that the mind is a bundle of thoughts. That is what Bhagavan implies in that verse is the term mind is used in different sense in different contexts. So sometimes we use the term mind to refer to the totality of all thoughts. That is what Bhagavan was referring to in the first sentence when he said thoughts alone are the mind, that the mind is made up of thoughts. And Bhagavan doesn't use the word bundle, but I think in some translations they put bundle of thoughts. It's a perfectly legitimate way of taking it, but it's not actually what Bhagavan said in Tamil. But the important point in that verse is not that the mind is a bundle of thoughts, because that's one way of viewing the mind. What is this mind essentially? That is, all these thoughts are constantly coming and going, but there is one essential thought in the mind without which no other thoughts can appear or disappear. That one essential thought is I, the ego. That's what Bhagavan referred to as the thought called I. And though this ego is a thought, it is a thought unlike any other thought, because all other thoughts are objects. whereas this thought is the subject. It is the only thought that is endowed with awareness. So it is only in the view of this first thought, ego, that all the other thoughts seem to exist. That's why Bhagavan concludes, therefore what is called mind is I, meaning it is this ego. So the important point in that verse is not that the mind is a bundle of thoughts, but that the essence of all those thoughts, the root of all those thoughts, is this first thought, I, the ego. For example, when Swami Ramanagiri says that the mind is nothing but a bundle of thoughts creeping into the conscious mind, what he refers to as the conscious mind, that is the knowing element of the mind, that is ego. All the other thoughts are just objects that appear and disappear in the view of ego or within the conscious mind. So when we read Bhagavan's teachings, we need to understand from the context the sense in which he uses the term mind. Whenever the mind is talked about as the mind knowing something, that is referring to ego, because the knowing element of the mind is ego. When it is talked about the mind as thoughts, as a bundle of thoughts or a constant stream of thoughts, that is the objective element of the mind. That is not the essence of the mind. That is the ego is the root thought. It's the essential thought. You can't have any other thought without ego. But you never have ego on its own, because ego is, the nature of ego is constantly to grasp form, and those, or whatever it grasps, is thoughts. So Bhagavan said this whole world, this body, all these things are nothing but thoughts. They're nothing but mental impressions. So in that sense, they're all just thoughts. But the essence of all these things is ego. So what Bhagavan taught us is, in order to deal with the mind, tackling the other thoughts is of no use. We need to tackle the root of the thought. Well, not it's of no use, it's of limited use. What we need to tackle is the root thought. So coming back again to what Swami Ramanagiri wrote, he wrote, there are three ways to handle this cheat. First, to treat him as a friend and give him full satisfaction. This is a very long and tiresome way, because he's never satisfied. Yes, that's true, he's never satisfied. Not only is it a very long and tiresome way, we can never solve the problem of the mind by gratifying it. We can't get rid of our desires by gratifying them. Bhagavan said, there's no bottomless pit, as bottomless as the pit of desires. However much you try to gratify those desires, you will never be able to fill that pit. That's one analogy Bhagavan used. Another analogy he used, he says, gratifying desires is like pouring petrol on a fire. That is, the more we try to satisfy our desires, the more like pouring petrol on a fire, the more the fire rages up, the more we try to satisfy our desires, the more the desires become stronger and stronger and stronger. So trying to gratify the mind's desires is never a solution. As Swami Ramanagiri says, because this mind is never satisfied. That is, dissatisfaction is the very nature of ego, because what we actually are is infinite happiness. But when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves as if we were a finite person. So as this finite entity, how can we experience anything infinite? So the very nature of ego is to be always dissatisfied. Because as ego, we're always seeking infinite satisfaction. that we can never experience so long as we remain as ego. That's why annihilating ego is the only solution. And then coming to the second way Swami Ramanagiri talks about, second, to treat him as an enemy and with all force try to get rid of him. This is only possible by the grace of the divine, because the mind has got two very powerful weapons, the discriminating intellect and the imaginative faculties. These two fellows can convince even God himself that black is white. That is, I think, what he's getting at here, treating the mind as an enemy and trying to force it. This is the way of yoga, trying to forcibly control the mind. This is it's of limited benefit, and as Bhagavan said, you can never defeat the mind by opposing it. Bhagavan used various analogies. One analogy he said, it's like the mind is like your shadow. If you want to get rid of your shadow, you can dig a pit and try to bury your shadow in the pit. But as you fill up the pit, the shadow rises up to the top. The mind is like that. That's one analogy Bhagavan used. There was some other analogy I thought of Bhagavan used for, it's just slipped my mind now. But anyway, I mean, Bhagavan pointed out in various ways, but trying to, the other analogy I was thinking of, there's a story in the Ramayana. That is Hanuman who is the monkey. The technical word for him is the Vānaras, I think it is. They're a human-like, mythological human-like monkey. He was a minister to the king Sugriva. Sugriva was the rightful king, but he had a younger brother, Vāli, and Vāli usurped the kingdom and took Sugriva's wife. How Vāli was able to do this was because he had done tapas and he had got a boon. But if he faces any enemy in battle, he will get half of his enemy's strength. He's already a very powerful warrior, so if he faces anyone in battle, he gets half their strength. Nobody can defeat him by facing him in battle. So Sugriva had his kingdom stolen and he was living in exile. When Rama came, Rama was at that time in search of his wife, because his wife Sita had been stolen by Ravana. And seeing that Sugriva was in a similar predicament, his brother had stolen his wife, he wanted to help Sugriva. And also later, after he helped Sugriva, Sugriva brought his army of monkeys, of Vānaras, and they were very important warriors in the battle against Ravana. But anyway, in order to put Sugriva back on the throne, Vāli has to be killed. But how to kill Vāli? Rama knew about this boon. So he knew that even Rama, who's God himself, if he faces Vāli face to face in a battle, half his strength will go to Vāli. So he knew it wasn't possible to kill Vāli in that way. So he told Sugriva, you go and face Vāli in battle. But I will be there. I will take care of it. So because Sugriva had confidence in Rama, he came and he challenged his brother. So his brother came and they fought, and of course Sugriva was defeated. And he came back to Rama and said, Rama said, wait, I will deal with him, but I wasn't able to do so now. Go and challenge him again. And again, Sugriva was defeated. The third time Sugriva went, and at the point where Vāli was about to kill Sugriva, Rama who had been hiding behind a tree, shot Vāli from behind. And this is a big thing in Ramayana. How can Rama, who's the very embodiment of Dharma, of righteousness, how can he go against the Dharma of kings and the warriors by killing an opponent from behind when he's fighting someone else? But the reason Rama did this, because what Vāli had done was an injustice, and the only way to defeat him was to shoot him from behind. And afterwards, when Vāli was lying there on his deathbed, he said to Rama, why did you kill me? If you had asked for my help, I could easily have got Sita back for you, because I can easily defeat Ravana. And Rama said, no, I can't ask for your help, because you have done the same wrong that Ravana has done. Just like Ravana has stolen Sita, you stole the wife of Sugriva, your younger brother. So, and this is the story. But Bhagavan used this analogy of Vāli and said the mind is like Vāli. If you try to oppose the mind, if you try to fight against the mind, half your power goes to the mind. So you can never defeat the mind by facing it, by confronting it. Therefore, you have to kill it from behind. Killing it from behind in this case means not attending to the thoughts, but attending only to your own being. That Bhagavan said that is analogous to Rama killing Vāli from behind. So it's trying to defeat the mind by opposing it is futile. So what is the way taught by Bhagavan? What Swami Ramanagiri says is not actually quite correct. What the way that Bhagavan taught is not that we should be waiting, letting thoughts come in and then rejecting them and letting the next thought come in and rejecting it. No, Bhagavan asked us not to concern ourselves with thoughts. In the 6th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, he says, that means however many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought arises, it's necessary to investigate to whom it arises. Investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever thought appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. So we're not trying to stop thoughts, we're not trying to control thoughts, we're not trying to oppose thoughts. We simply turn our attention away from the thoughts back to ourselves. When our attention is turned away from the thoughts, since the thoughts exist only in our awareness, if we deny them our attention, they will subside. And when we turn our attention back to ourselves, the we who is turning the attention back to ourselves is ego. And by turning our attention back to ourselves, we subside. That is what Bhagavan meant by not confronting the mind, but shooting it from behind, like Rama shot Vāli from behind. In other words, not confronting the mind, not trying to oppose the thoughts. Let the thoughts be. Thoughts are no concern to us at all. Our concern is to know who am I. In order to know who am I, we need to attend to ourselves. So let the thoughts be. We attend to ourselves. If we turn our attention back to our thoughts, the thoughts will of their own accord subside. So this is the way taught by Bhagavan. So I think in this respect, this Swami Ramanagiri didn't really have a very... He was a good devotee. He was obviously very devoted to Bhagavan, but he didn't have a very deep understanding of his teachings. Does anyone have any questions about this? Melissa, you have your hand up.
Yes, and I think, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think a new clarity has arisen in that I see that now whenever there is an object that appears, whether it be a thought or a sensation or a perception, whenever an object appears, that already is pointing to a separation and division, because there is an object and there is a subject. So the division, just in the very appearance of the object, including thoughts,
Yeah.
even good thoughts,
Yeah.
even benevolent thoughts,
Yes.
kindly thoughts, etc.
Yeah.
It's already a division.
Yeah.
The division has already arisen.
Yeah.
And so the only way to undo the division is to turn entirely to the subject.
Exactly, exactly. That is what Bhagavan means when he says, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is the very attention we give to any object is what is nourishing ego, because you can't attend to an object without having this separation of subject and object. The subject is always distinct from whatever object it attends to. So the attending to objects not only gives reality to the object, it also gives reality to the subject. So that we are, the subject is ego. So we are nourishing and sustaining ego by whenever we attend to anything other than ourselves. Whereas when we attend to ourselves, because ego then has nothing, no form to hold on to, it subsides. This is, I would say, the most unique aspect of Bhagavan's teachings. This is the one thing that Bhagavan has made clear in a way that, as far as I'm aware, it has not been made clear in any of the ancient sastras. That is, what Bhagavan says is in perfect accord with all the explanations given in the ancient sastras, all the deeper explanations, that is. But he's clarified the efficacy of the practice. He's clarified the nature of the practice by pointing out this simple fact of the nature of ego. Ego is nourished and sustained by attending to anything other than itself. Because, as you say, there is the separation between subject and object, which creates the appearance not only of the object, but also of the subject. Without object,
Yes.
there's no subject. Without phenomena, there's no ego. That is, the very rising of ego brings phenomena into existence. That's why Bhagavan says, if ego rises, everything rises. If ego subsides, everything subsides. So, but if instead of attending to any object, if we attend to the subject, ego subsides. Because we can explain to the number. I mean, one way of explaining it is what I said. Ego's got nothing to hold on to. When it tries to hold itself, because it is formless, it's got nothing to hold on to, so it subsides. Another way of saying it is, we seem to be ego only so long as we're attending to objects, to anything other than ourselves. But if we look at ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. That's why he says, Tedinal otum piticum, if sought, it takes flight. And why he says in verse 17 of Upadēśa Undiyār, if without forgetfulness, we investigate the form of the mind, that means ego he's referring to there, there's no such thing as mind at all. That is, we seem to be this ego so long as we look at other things. But when we look at ourselves, there's no ego to be found. So we merge back into what we actually are, the pure being awareness that we actually are.
Yes, thank you.
This is such a precious teaching Bhagavan has given us.
Yeah.
This is really the very heart of his teaching. If we understand this, so how to control the mind, how how to curb the rising of ego. Very simple. All we have to do is attend to ourselves.
And yes, I think I see now that this is the very essence of duality.
Yeah, exactly.
That as soon as there is separation of object and subject, duality seems to.
What is the most fundamental duality is this subject-object duality.
Yes.
And because subject is one and objects are many, it brings in all this multiplicity, all this huge diversity.
Yes.
So
Thank you,
ego
Michael.
is the very root of everything. In this context, can I tell a few analogies Bhagavan gave to illustrate this? The best known one is the bridegroom's friend. That is, in the old days in India, marriages were very elaborate affairs. They would go on for 5 days usually. And what would usually happen is the marriage would take place in the bride's village. So the bridegroom would come from his village along with all his relatives and other guests. They would come to the bride's village, and there they would be entertained for 5 days, during which the marriage ceremony will take place. So there was once a wayfarer. He noticed there was a marriage party going towards a village. So he thought, this is a very nice opportunity. So he went and he joined the bridegroom's party, and he slipped ahead, and he said to he started giving instructions to the bride's family. Oh, they're coming now, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then he would go back to the bridegroom's family, and he would be welcoming them and everything. So the bride's family thought he was an important member of the bridegroom's family, and vice versa. So for 5 days, he had a great time. He was happily feasting. He was bossing over people, giving instructions, and he was having a great time. After the 5th day, everyone leaves, but the very close relatives alone remain. So the bride and bridegroom's family, they alone remain. And so they started talking about who was this person, how is this person related to you, all these sort of things. And then finally, one of them asked, who was that very helpful young man who was part of your party? No, he's nothing to do with us. We thought he was part of your party. And as soon as they started to make inquiries about him, he noticed what was happening and he slipped away. So that's a very well-known story that Bhagavan told to illustrate how ego can boss over us. Ego has been bossing over us for countless lives. But all we need to do is to start questioning it, start looking within to see who is this fellow? To whom does he belong? Does he belong to... That is when Bhagavan said that he doesn't belong to either party. He's also illustrating another thing, what he says in verse 24 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, in which he says, the insentient body does not say I. In other words, the body is not aware of itself as I. Sat-cit does not rise. But in between, one thing, I, rises as the extent of a body. Since it is aware of itself as I, it's not the body, because the body is not aware of itself as I. And since it rises, it's not sat-cit, because sat-cit doesn't rise. But it takes on properties of both. It takes on the existence and awareness of it borrows its existence and its awareness from sat-cit, and it borrows its form from the body. But it is not actually either of them. Just like that, this bridegroom's friend, he doesn't actually belong to either party. So as soon as you begin investigating him, he'll slip away. So that's one story. Another story Bhagavan told, which is not so well known, but it's a very nice story. That is, there was a sadhu. A sadhu means a religious mendicant who he lived in a mandapam, that's a pillared hall outside a village. And once a day, he would go into a village and he would beg his food. And he would bring the food home. He would have half of it before going to bed, and he would keep the other half to have the next morning when he gets up. One morning when he woke up, he found his begging bowl was empty. So he understood someone had come and stolen his food. So he decided that night to be very vigilant and watch out who is the thief who has come and stolen his food. So he kept himself awake for some time, watching out for this, but no one came, and finally he fell asleep. And when he woke up in the morning again, his begging bowl was empty. So then he decided he had to be more vigilant. So the next night he was lying there, being very, very vigilant, just like when we're investigating ourselves, we need to be vigilant. We shouldn't allow our attention to slip away. We shouldn't slip into thoughts. We shouldn't slip into sleep. We need to remain balanced in the intermediate state of self-attentiveness. So he was very vigilant. He didn't fall asleep. And after some time, he heard some tick, 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 tick. And he recognized it was the claws of the dog. And so he opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, the dog slipped away because it knew it was being watched. And Bhagavan said he's a very good sadhu, very gentle. He wouldn't do anything to harm the dog. But it wasn't necessary for him to do any harm. As soon as he opened his eyes, the dog knew it's being watched and it slipped away. So the next night, again, he was very vigilant, but he had his eyes half open. And after some time, he saw the dog came and it just peeped into the mandapam. It didn't even actually enter the mandapam. It just peeped in to see whether he's awake. He looked at it, and as soon as it saw it was being looked at, it slipped away. The next night, it was a bit further away. Finally, it stopped coming altogether. But what Bhagavan said is, just like that is the nature of this ego. All we have to do is to watch it. So long as it's being watched, it doesn't dare to poke up its head. It's when we fail to watch it, when we fail to be self-attentive, it jumps up and does all its mischief.
Thank you, Michael. Those stories, I'm familiar with them, but now they take on greater meaningfulness.
Yeah.
One other small question I've been meaning to ask and was waiting for the right moment to do so. This might be it. When you say that sat-cit does not rise, but that ego rises, how can anything rise if all there is sat-cit?
The truth is nothing can rise, nothing has ever risen. It seems to have arisen.
Okay.
When Bhagavan was asked how this ego comes into existence, he sometimes used to say, because of avicāra. Avicāra means non-investigation. Because of our failure to attend to ourselves, it has come into existence. But actually, that's not, we can say in a way, Bhagavan is giving a little bit of a cheating answer. Because the non-investigation is only for the ego, so there cannot be non-investigation before the rising of ego. But why he said like that is, if we attend to ourselves, then there's no such thing as ego at all. So the most practical answer to that question is to say it's because of avicāra. But if we turn within deeply enough and look at ourselves deeply enough, we will find there's no such thing as ego at all. So the question of how it came into existence doesn't arise at all. But you're perfectly right. Logically, nothing, because all there is
Yes.
pure being. So how can there be any rising? And pure being is immutable. It never undergoes any change. So pure being cannot rise. There's nothing other than pure being. So how can there be any rising? But there seems to be now, because of our not attending to ourselves. If we attend to ourselves, we will find there never was any such thing as ego at all. Because there never was any ego, there never was any world or anything else, because all these things exist only in the view of ego. That is why the ultimate teaching is what is called ajata.
Yes.
But nothing
yes.
has ever come into existence or
Yes.
ceased to exist. What is alone is as it always is.
Yes, yes. So I think I see more clearly now how it all fits together.
Yeah.
And this is where I would say for myself, the analogy of the dream is useful, that for however the infinite does the infinite, a dream arises, a dream of ego, a dream of world, a dream of body, mind, and everything else arises, and then the time is for it to pass as a dream rises and passes.
But the dream arises only in the view of the dreamer.
Yes.
And if the dreamer,
Yes.
the ego, investigates itself, there's no such thing at all. So no dream has
Yes.
ever arisen.
Yes.
That is the beauty of Bhagavan's teaching. That is
Yes.
Bhagavan made it clear, ajata is not a teaching. Because in ajata, there's no one to teach, there's no one to be taught, there's no need for any teaching, because what is alone is that it. So for teaching, he comes down to Dṛṣṭi-sṛṣṭi vada. That is the dream. But the dream has no existence except independent of the dreamer. It exists only in the view of the dreamer. So Dṛṣṭi-sṛṣṭi means Dṛṣṭi is seeing or perception, and Sṛṣṭi is creation. Creation is dependent upon the perception. We bring this world into being by perceiving it. Just like a dream, we bring it into being by seeing it. So that is the practical teaching to give, because why does it all come into existence? There cannot be a dream without a dreamer. If a dreamer investigates itself, it'll be found there's no such thing as a dreamer at all, and therefore no dream. So the ultimate truth is ajata. But you can't give a jata as a teaching, because it's like going to a doctor with a serious ailment. If the doctor says, "Oh, nothing's wrong with you, go home," not a very good doctor. You need a doctor who at least recognizes that there's something wrong with you. So Bhagavan recognized something is wrong with us. What is wrong with us? The fact that we've risen as ego. That is the problem. And if we investigate that ego, it'll be clear we've never risen as ego. And problems.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Michael, isn't there one more story about the 10th man? When you mentioned these other two stories, what is the 10th man story?
That's also a similar story. That's a story. These other two stories, as far as I'm aware, they were Bhagavan's own stories. He used these stories. He didn't get them from anyone else. But the 10th man story is a story mentioned in a lot of older Vedic texts. That is the 10 foolish men were traveling, and at a certain point they had to cross a river. So they decided, having crossed the river, they wanted to be sure that they had all crossed safely. So one of them counted all the others: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, he started weeping. Oh, where is the 10th man? Where's the 10th man? And each one of them started counting, and they all counted only 9. So they were all lamenting the passing away of their companion. And a passerby came, and he saw them all weeping. He asked, what did it matter? What happened? They said, oh, we were 10 people, and we crossed this river, but now we're only 9, so we've lost one of our companions. They don't even know who it is they've lost. They're still lamenting because one of them is lost. So he knew the simple solution. He said, count again. Each of you count yourself. I'll give you a tap, and you count yourself. So he gave a tap to the first one, second one, third one, up to the 10th man. When he gave the 10th man, he said 10, and they were all rejoicing. They found their lost companion. But of course, he was never lost. Likewise, our real nature, we think we have lost. We are weeping for God. Where is God? How is God? I want to see God. But the God we are looking for is ourself. It's not something outside ourself. So Bhagavan uses this analogy in I think, if I remember correctly, verse 37 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, I think it is. Let me just get it to be sure. What he says in verse 37 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, even the contention that declares duality only in spiritual practice, non-duality in attainment, is not true. Both when one is eagerly searching and when one has found oneself, who indeed is one other than the 10th man? So he's emphasizing that we are never anything other than what we always actually are. But we seem to, with all this appearance of duality, is because we haven't looked at ourselves. We've overlooked ourselves, and so we see ourselves as all this multiplicity. If we look at ourselves keenly enough, we as ego will thereby subside back into our source, and then we will see that we alone are. Then there is nothing else.
Yes. Thank you, Michael. I think
Right.
you just answered Sriram's. Thank you.
Michael, can I ask you a very quick question?
Yes.
It's a technical question. You said that let the 1,000 thoughts come and go and just watch them. But,
no, I didn't say that. Absolutely not. So long as you watch them, you've got your subject-object distinction there.
Right. That was my
Don't watch
question.
the thoughts. Let the thoughts be. Then why should we be concerned about thoughts? Do we come here to know about thoughts, or we come here to know what we actually are? Since our aim is to know who am I, we should attend only to I. Let the thoughts be.
So
thoughts seem to be an obstacle only because we attend to them. The thoughts themselves are harmless. It's our interest in them, our attention to them, that causes all the problems.
So is it like neglecting the thoughts, not even paying attention to them, right? Neglect.
Well,
or nothing.
In effect, we're neglecting thoughts. But we shouldn't try to neglect thoughts. We shouldn't try to ignore thoughts. Because if you try to ignore thoughts, you're thinking...
That's another thought.
Yeah,
that's another form.
Yes. It's like if you go to a doctor and the doctor gives you a medicine and says this medicine is very effective, but one thing, when you take this medicine, you shouldn't think of a monkey. Every time you want to take the medicine, you have to remember, oh, I shouldn't think of a monkey. You've thought of a monkey and you'll never be able to take the medicine. So the good doctor will say, whenever you take this medicine, think only of an elephant. If you think of an elephant, then you're not thinking of a monkey. Problem solved. So like that, we shouldn't try to ignore thoughts. We shouldn't be bothered by thoughts at all. That's why Bhagavan says, however many thoughts rise, so that means however many thoughts arise, what? It implies so what? Big deal. Thoughts aren't our concern. Our concern is to know who am I. So attend to I, and the thoughts will take care of themselves.
Okay. So
if
when
we try to oppose them, we are like facing Vāli. We'll never,
Yeah.
we'll be
Right.
defeated inevitably.
so is it like a deer in headlights when you see the thoughts, you just stop? That's it. You do nothing
No, you don't
and
do
pay
that.
attention to yourself.
You turn your
Oh,
attention back
okay.
to the one to whom the thoughts appear.
Okay. Okay.
Holding on to the I thought is thinking of an elephant.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Awesome.
Right.
And that's
Thank
its
you,
only
Mike.
function is it's something positive to think about
Well,
and to hold on to.
but it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's more than
Yeah.
that, because that is what,
It is.
when we attend to ourselves, we are attending to what is real. We're holding on to what is
Okay.
real, and what is unreal will slip off.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael,
Yeah.
very much.
This
No
is
more
why
online.
the first, when it is given the qualifications for following this path, the first thing is Nitya and Nitya-vivēka, distinguishing the eternal from the ephemeral. What is the only permanent thing in our experience? It is ourself, our own being.
Yeah.
So that is what if we hold on to what is permanent, what is impermanent will slip off.
Yep.
Because all these things are not holding on to us.
Yeah.
It's not this body that is holding me. I am holding this body and saying, I am this body. So all we need to do is to hold on to ourselves, and all these adjuncts, these upadis, these limiting adjuncts will drop off of their own accord, because we're not holding on to them anymore.
Yeah. Beautiful.